as complemented by clause 57, this would exempt individuals from registering in the electronic system management system. The exemption ensures that small traders, the one we popularly known as mama mbogas, and those that are in the formal sector are not negatively impacted by this particular proposal. Additionally, therefore, the commissioner we have proposed will ensure administrative guidelines to address any concerns regarding the implementation of this system. But we have applauded that there is a need to have every trader and every business person in the country operate within the eTIMS system, Honorable Speaker, and this we realize would enhance both revenue collection and reduce the cost of tax administration. Honorable Speaker, stakeholders expressed their concerns on clause 20, which would require that withholding taxes be remitted to the Kenya Revenue Authority within 24 hours. They believed that this timeline was too short and would result in additional administrative expenses, Honorable Speaker. But the proposal here, Honorable Speaker, we have had many institutions, many companies that withhold, whether it's excise duty or VAT, that means they are agents for the collection of these particular taxes, had up to 50 days before they remitted these particular payments to the Kenya Revenue Authority. So, Honorable Speaker, we noticed that by them getting 50 days of these taxes, it means these businesses were being funded through their working capital by taxpayers' money, Honorable Speaker. But again, from having between 20 and 50 days to remit these monies to KRA to under 24 hours, we found that 24 hours was a little too ambitious, and the committee amended that and said we would allow that these businesses can remit these particular taxes within 5 working days. The key word here, working, Honorable Speaker, also takes care of the complexities of weekends and and official holidays, Honorable Speaker. Clause 24 was one other very contested by many stakeholders. They were concerned about the proposal to increase pay rate for individuals earning more than 500,000 shillings. And Honorable Speaker, having really considered this, we found also that our tax bands have not been amended for years. And part of our recommendation, even if you're not able to make this particular amendment in this particular bill, Honorable Speaker, there is need to revise our tax bands for pay because they have not been revised for very many years. But Honorable Speaker, we suggested instead of having the 35% only accrue from 500,000 shillings to above, we add an additional tax band of 500,000 shillings to 800,000 shillings to be charged at a pay rate of 32.5%, and those earning more than 800,000 to be taxed at a rate of 35%, Honorable Speaker. Clause 24 introduced digital content monetization at a withholding tax of 15%. However, we notice that this is, if you compare the withholding tax on other professions, whether it's legal fees, accounting fees, management fees, and all the other professional fees, withholding tax on all these particular fees is at 3%, Honorable Speaker. And that is why we found that charging digital content creators at 500% more was unfair and punitive to this very, very growing sector, and we propose that this withholding tax be reduced to 3% withholding tax, Honorable Speaker. And it's good also, Honorable Speaker, to appreciate the expansion of this particular sector. We have got very, very many Kenyans, especially young Kenyans, who are exerting very, very well on this space. But some people are asking us, then why are we taxing us? I'd like to remind our digital content creators, Honorable Speaker, the teachers that got employed recently that earn an income of 30,000 shillings per month, Honorable Speaker, they pay their rightful share of tax. The nurses that help our mothers deliver in our hospitals, or the nurses that treat our old relatives and the old people in home-based care, pay their rightful share of tax. The doctors that work day and night to save lives of this particular country, the emergency attendants that work in our ambulances, pay their rightful share of taxes, Honorable Speaker. So we are really asking, we are not asking you to pay 15% or digital content creators, that is too much, but we are going to politely ask you to pay 3% withholding tax so that we can generate revenue to connect other people to the national grid of electricity in our villages so that they can also get a chance to also participate in this sector that you are in, Honorable Speaker. And I like the introduction of this has also opened a national dialogue about digital content creators. And they came and told us, now, next time we want you to incentivize us by reducing the prices of our cameras, of the video cameras that we use to generate this content, Mr. Speaker, and views that we have taken seriously as a committee. We will endeavor now to carry them on in our next report, Mr. Speaker. Clause 28 of the proposed increase of VAT on petroleum and liquefied petroleum gas from 8% to 16%, Honorable Speaker, was a very contended issue, Honorable Speaker. But what has the committee done? Honorable Speaker, when we put the VAT on fuel at 8% and every vegetable product at 16%, so what that meant, Honorable Speaker, that these particular businesses in this particular sector were always in a VAT credit refund position, because their input tax, Honorable Speaker, they're able to pay their VAT on input at 16%. But when they sell this fuel at 8%, Honorable Speaker, it means there's an 8% difference, which means that these particular businesses have always been on a credit side when they're asking for tax refund, Mr. Speaker. And what that essentially means is that taxpayers' money have been used to finance these businesses that carry out the business of this of fuel, Mr. Speaker, because of that disparity between their input tax that they pay at 16%, but their output tax they claim at 8%, Honorable Speaker, which therefore creates that particular position. Honorable Speaker, we have agreed that we are going to carry on this VAT on fuel at 16%. But on the other hand, we looked at the agreement that Kenya had, the discussions that we've had about climate change, about climate financing, about going green by 2030, Honorable Speaker. And we have this, and we recommend to this House that we adopt other measures that are going to ensure our Kenyans against this increased cost of VAT, and making sure that in moving forward, that the cost of green energy is going to be way cheaper, and therefore reducing the need for use of these fossil fuels, Honorable Speaker. And that's why, for example, we have zero-rated both LPG gas and LPG cylinders, Honorable Speaker. And this is not just exempting them, but by zero-rating them, we are making these particular manufacturers and traders on this particular aspect, business, Mr. Speaker, to be allowed to claim their input tax at 16%, which therefore means that if these proposals are carried on by these businesses and this advantage being transferred to the consumers, we are going to see the price of our LPG gas and LPG cylinders go down by 16%. In addition to that, the other cost elements that comprise of fuel, the railway development levy and ID and import declaration fees, Honorable Speaker, we have reduced that to around, that is like 3%. So when you check the increase from 8% to 16%, it means the actual increase on VAT on fuel is only 8 percentage points. And if you now deduct the reduction on railway development levy and IDF, that means that the marginal increase on VAT on fuel would be around 4 percentage, would be around 4.5 percentage points, Honorable Speaker. On this also, we are looking forward to having most of the imports. The data from our Kenya Revenue Authority, from the Customs Department, has shown that most of the motor vehicles that we're importing in this country are hybrid cars, because Kenyans are now going to motor vehicles that don't rely wholly on fuel, but are both, and that are semi-electric and semi-use fuel, Honorable Speaker. And as such, we have incentivized manufacturers of electric motor vehicles, electric motorcycles, electric border cycles, so that in the long run we grow our manufacturing of electric buses, electric vehicles, and electric motorcycles. And not just that, zero-rated also their charging system, their charging units. And we look forward, just like countries like the United States of America or the UK, where most of the means of transport, whether it is buses or motorcycles, Honorable Speaker, are going to be electric, and therefore reducing the need for use of fuel, Honorable Speaker. Key to note, Honorable Speaker, one of the greatest challenges you're facing as a country has also been the depreciation of the Kenya shillings against the US dollars, Honorable Speaker. And the oil component, the amount of money we are spending per month, per annum, importing this fuel is a point of concern. So until that time, when we explore our own oil and have our own oil, Honorable Speaker, we have to think about alternative sources of energy that are green, that are cheaper, and that are sustainable, Honorable Speaker. We also was interesting to find innovations that have been done by some companies. And I would like to give an example of a institution called Coco that makes biofuel. They have come up with an innovation of stoves and canisters that reduce the cost of safe fuel for use for cooking at home to Kenya shillings, 10 shillings per meal. That it can cost you at least around 10 shillings to prepare a meal at home. And how much does that cooker and that canister cost? Only 1,500, Mr. Speaker. And these particular institutions, we have seen them expand across the country. And if we continue to incentivize use of clean energy for cooking, we are going to get away from these fossil fuels and reduce the pressure on our imports, Honorable Speaker, therefore leading to a stabilization of shilling and make the movement of particular sectors and our consumables much more cheaper, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, our committee also introduced an amendment to the first schedule of the VAT Act, incorporating taxable food supplies that are made for the school feeding program, acknowledged by the Cabinet Secretary of Education, Honorable Speaker. During a time when you're talking about hunger, when you're talking about food security, Honorable Speaker, and our school children, and our school-going children, we have seen efforts even by county governments. We have seen efforts by, I think, our best serving example is the constituency headed by the Honorable KJ, that have been able to establish a very effective school feeding program at, I think, only 20 shillings per meal, Honorable Speaker. So what we have done is an introduction to introduce to the first schedule of the VAT Act taxable so food supplies that are made to school feeding programs to be zero rated. This means that those school feeding programs that are counties, that different institutions are trying to start in our schools then are going to be incentivized and are going to grow, Honorable Speaker. And I think another example is what Mombasa Cement is doing in Mombasa by having a school feeding program that almost feeds all school-going children in that particular county, Honorable Speaker. The committee observed that there was an attempt, or there's a proposal in the bill to exempt from VAT transfer of businesses as a going concern. This, Honorable Speaker, would have led to a loss of 100 billion shillings in terms of the proposed taxes, Honorable Speaker. And this is one of the clauses that we have recommended for deletion, so that if when I transfer my money from my bank account, from one bank account to another bank account, I pay VAT and I pay excise duty. When I transfer money from my M-Pesa account to someone else's M-Pesa account, even when I'm transferring money from one of my M-Pesa lines to my other M-Pesa line, I get to pay a tax. Why would we exempt transfer of businesses as a going concern from taxation? From the calculations given to us by the Budget Parliamentary Office, this was going to lead to a potential loss of 100 billion shillings, money that we have now got back in the bill, and therefore the deletion of this particular clause would mean that we will be able to raise an additional 100 billion shillings, Honorable Speaker. Clause 36 was another contended issue, Mr. Speaker. This clause required that if you went to court and you had a tax dispute, and you went to tribunal, and you lost the case, if you wanted to appeal your case, you would be required to deposit 20% of the disputed amount with Kenya Revenue Authority. We found that this was a violation of the rights of taxpayers to access justice. It was unfair to require somebody who seeks legal redress because they feel aggrieved to be required to pay a deposit of 20% for it. And, Honorable Speaker, we urge this House to carry on the proposal for deletion of this particular clause, Honorable Speaker. Clause 43B, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Honorable Speaker, again, I had extensively talked about that particular matter. Let me get to clause 59. The deletion of clause 59 from the bill, Honorable Speaker, was about the Tax Procedures Act and general provision relating to objections and appeals. And this, Honorable Speaker, was opposing restrictions to access to justice, and a proposal that, Honorable Speaker, we say they be deleted. Clause 61, Honorable Speaker, regards to Section 84 of the Tax Procedures Act. The committee proposes that 61 be deleted due to its punitive nature of concerning the tax shortfall penalty. Currently, Clause 61 imposes penalties for tax shortfalls without taking into consideration of innocent and inadvertent errors made by taxpayers. Honorable Speaker, this clause said that if you underdeclared your taxes, or the Kenya Revenue Authority felt that you had underdeclared your taxes, that they would penalize you for it, and you felt it may not have been deliberate. It could be an accounting error that was done when you're filing your returns, and therefore we have deleted that requirement for that particular penalty to be imposed on taxpayers. Clause 62 on penalties for failing to comply with the Electronic Systems Act. This amendment is to insert a new section 86 that aims to modify the penalty provisions related to non-compliance with the electronic tax system, making the penalty more reasonable and conducive. Honorable Speaker, this particular proposal was recommending that if you were not on e-teams, or if you were found that you needed to issue an iTax receipt but did not issue one, then you would be fined 10 times more. You'd be required to pay a fine of 10 times the amount that was tax due. Honorable Speaker, in as much that we want to enforce compliance with this particular tax system, we felt a fine of 10 times more was too punitive, and Honorable Speaker, we propose that the penalty only be 2 times of the tax due, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, we are proposing an amendment to the bill to include a new clause 67, and this, Honorable Speaker, wants to address the powers granted to the Commissioner regarding the adjustment of specific rates of export levy. Currently, Section 5.4 allows the adjustment of the specific rate of export levy to account for inflation. However, it is proposed that this provision be removed as it mirrors Section 10 of the Excess Duty Act. Clause 6 of the bill already seeks to eliminate the Commissioner's power to adjust specific rates of excess duty based on inflation. The rationale behind this proposed amendments is to ensure consistency in the treatment of specific rates for both export levy and excess duty, Honorable Speaker. Clause 76 of the bill on the deductions of the National Housing Fund, Honorable Speaker. Another very contentious issue. We listened to the view of Kenyans, and Kenyans told us it is a good thing to make houses affordable to the public. It's a good thing that somebody who rents an apartment in Kenor or in Section 58 or in either part of the country and pays rent have an alternative of paying the equivalent of the rent but get to own that house at the end of a particular period, Honorable Speaker. Mortgages, access to mortgages still remain a privilege of the high-end people in this particular market, Honorable Speaker. We agreed, and every stakeholder that we met told us, yes, it's going to lead to job creation. The doors that are going to be made, the windows that are going to be made, the suppliers for those particular goods, the people that are going to provide the rest of the services, that is the spiral effect of it. The people are going to sell food into those particular units, Honorable Speaker. We felt, they said, there is a need for this particular housing fund, Honorable Speaker. But they were worried about the how. And they were telling us, for you to start us off with 3% of our basic pay, it is too punitive. They told us, and one of them, I remember, looking at me on the face and telling me, Honorable Chair, if we cap this particular housing fund to 2,500 shillings a month, and you tell me that I'm paying 3%, you're not paying 3% of your basic pay. You're actually paying around 0.0045 of your basic pay. And they said, this is discriminative. We feel that you people that are earning a lot more want to pay much less than us. Because I get to pay my rightful share of 3% if I'm earning around 80,000 shillings a month, but you who is earning 500,000 shillings, because you have capped that contribution to 2,500, you pay 0.0045%. Honorable Speaker, we listened to the view of these Kenyans, and we proposed a reduction in the housing fund contribution from 3% employer and 3% employee to 1.5% employee contribution and 1.5% employer contribution, Honorable Speaker. And it's very important to note that the capping that was capping the contribution to 2,500 has been removed, because this would have been discriminative against those people that are earning less, because those people earning less would have paid their rightful share of the 1.5%, but you and I that have a higher pay slip then would get to pay much less or a higher percentage, Honorable Speaker. We have also established that these funds will go into the consolidated fund, Honorable Speaker, as per the PFM Act. Mr. Speaker, the shift towards the informal sector also poses challenges to our tax revenue. As the economy diversifies, the jobs opportunities arise in all sectors, it has become crucial to expand our tax base. Honorable Speaker, Kenyans told us that the few of us are paying taxes, but there are so many others that should pay the rightful pay of tax that are not paying. And key in point was the small businesses. And Honorable Speaker, on the proposal to have the turnover tax have a threshold of 500,000 shillings would mean that those people selling around 1,000 with the sales of around 1,600 shillings a day would be required to pay a turnover tax of 3%. Honorable Speaker, we saw this band too little, and we have therefore proposed to increase this band to at least 1 million shillings sales per annum to 25 million shillings per annum as those Kenyans that would pay the turnover tax, Honorable Speaker. And you're also telling them, people are asking, why are you taxing me on gross instead of taxing me on profit? And Honorable Speaker, we have told them that at the end of the year, you do not have to pay turnover tax. If you want, you can pay the corporation tax at 30%, but then you'll have to calculate your revenues and deduct your tax allowable expenses. And many Kenyans were like, I don't want to go through that process. Tell me how much I need to pay because I want to pay my rightful share of tax. I'll pay that, and we absolutely move forward, Honorable Speaker. With those many remarks, Honorable Speaker, I really would wish to thank the members of the committee. It was very tedious work. It was a lot of work. Most of us still have a back problem even now. Our members of Secretariat, they have been doing almost 24 hours of work to make sure that we put this particular report in order, Honorable Speaker. And because I want to give as many honorable members as possible to contribute to this particular matter, I only have one last statement to make, Honorable Speaker. The difference between tax exempt and zero rated. This, I find it quite baffling that we use tax exemption and zero rate interchangeably. They are as different as heaven and earth. Because when services or products are exempted from tax, it means that those businesses cannot claim their input tax. And that makes the price of those particular products at least 16% more expensive. And that is why, although the bill proposes to exempt manufacturing of fertilizer, manufacturing of pharmaceuticals, manufacturing of human vaccines, manufacturing of pesticides, agricultural equipment, transportation of sugarcane from factories, from farms to factories, to be tax exempted. This committee, Honorable Speaker, has recommended in our report that these particular products and services be moved from tax exemption to zero rate, so that that transfer of that manufacturing of fertilizer, manufacturing of pharmaceuticals, manufacturing of medicine, manufacturing of human vaccines be allowed to be, that benefit be allowed to be transferred to the consumer by making those particular products 16% cheaper, Honorable Speaker. But we are hoping, and this I want to really urge the Kenya Revenue Authority to make sure that they enforce that once we transfer these particular privileges and this zero rating of these products and services, that benefit be transferred to the consumer. We want to see the price of LPG gas and LPG cylinders go down by 16% if this House approves this particular commission, Honorable Speaker. We want to see the cost of locally manufactured fertilizer go down by 16% if this particular proposal is accepted by this Honorable Speaker. We want to see the price of locally manufactured medicine and human vaccines and pharmaceuticals and agricultural pesticides go down by 16%, Honorable Speaker, if these particular proposals are accepted by this House, Honorable Speaker. We have a very ambitious, this bill has an ambitious plan of exporting mobile phones across Africa, Honorable Speaker. We have seen the demand of smartphones and mobile phones in this country, and we have a big potential to manufacture them. The manufacturers of mobile phones came and told us that honorable committee members, if you zero rate these products that are used as raw materials for assembly of mobile phones, we would be able to manufacture mobile phones in Kenya, smartphones in Kenya at a cost of at least 8,000 shillings and be able to export this to other African countries, Mr. Speaker. We found this very revolutionary, and we urge this House to support this particular amendment, Honorable Speaker. We have had a huge influx in a digital space in terms of digital lenders, Honorable Speaker. But we found that the excise duty and the VAT on the transaction fees on digital platforms for mobile money and for digital lenders was discriminatory against that of the banks, because banks were getting preferential treatment by getting preferential rates. But, Honorable Speaker, our report aims at harmonizing the rates that are being charged by digital lenders and microfinance institutions to that of the banks, Honorable Speaker, so that we create a level playing field. Honorable Speaker, some of us, when we left school, the first thing we wanted to do was open a bank account. The people that are leaving school, the first thing they want to do is not open a bank account, is to have a digital wallet. And we're saying we need to incentivize this space. This is the next frontier in financial inclusion, and we are asking this honorable House to agree with us and pass our report, pass the amended finance bill as proposed by the Committee of Finance and National Planning. And with those very many remarks, I want to donate the rest of my minutes so that this House can extensively debate this particular matter, and hopefully our good idea can give birth to a great idea, and that great idea can give birth to the greatest ideas. And with that, Honorable Speaker, I support, and I ask the Vice Chair of our committee, the Honorable Ambassador Benjamin Langat, to second.
Thank you, Honorable Kimani. Who is seconding you? Danger.
Yes, sir. Yes, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank you for the opportunity to second this bill, and I rise to second this finance bill of 2023. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you said yesterday that this bill has been transacted in funerals, churches, other social places, Mr. Speaker, and you advise us that we must now come to the House and transact this bill. Mr. Speaker, we have just come from a campaign less than a year ago. Some of the issues that were transacted or canvassed, Mr. Speaker, were mainly three issues, Mr. Speaker. One of them was cost of living. Number two, Mr. Speaker, our level of public debts. Number four, Mr. Speaker, is empowerment of the youth. Mr. Speaker, it is in the public domain that our public debt is the highest ever, Mr. Speaker. And because of itinerary of commission or omission, Mr. Speaker, we found ourselves there. Mr. Speaker, if I was to liken Kenya to a public company, Mr. Speaker, I would say Kenya is a very high-geared company, Mr. Speaker. We have borrowed more than what we should have done, Mr. Speaker. And those of us who are accountants, who have managed public entities, Mr. Speaker, you know, when a company is high-geared, Mr. Speaker, you have two options. One is to close the company, Mr. Speaker. Number two, Mr. Speaker, is to bring in more capital, Mr. Speaker, by the shareholders. Mr. Speaker, this republic, the shareholders are Kenyans. Mr. Speaker, this House is the board of management, Mr. Speaker. The president is the CEO, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we must make a decision whether we want to close the company or we bring in more capital injection, Mr. Speaker. If you ask the shareholders of the company will say, no, we are not closing the company, Mr. Speaker. We need to do something to bring in more capital, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if I liken this country to an individual, Mr. Speaker, I would say the person is sick. When you are sick, Mr. Speaker, you must seek for medical advice. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, sometimes the doctor prescribes medicine. And Mr. Speaker, medicine are not always very sweet. They are not palatable, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, sometimes the doctor might even prefer that surgery be done, Mr. Speaker. And surgery is not very, very nice, Mr. Speaker. But Mr. Speaker, we must do it because that is the only thing that remains to be done. Why am I saying that, Mr. Speaker? This country is faced by very serious problems of public debt, very serious problems of cost of living, very serious problems of the need to create employment, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, if we continue doing things the same way we used to do, Mr. Speaker, it can only be the results are the same. We'll continue borrowing, Mr. Speaker. We'll continue not having employment for our youth, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm only saying this bill is good because it proposes radical changes, Mr. Speaker, to help us to resolve the problems that will come, that we are in now, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the question is the process nice? Mr. Speaker, it may not be nice. But Mr. Speaker, we need to take those decisions so that tomorrow is better than today, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the members of the committee because we sat and we listened to members of the public, Mr. Speaker,